Looking back, I never imagined a holiday fling would turn into the kind of trouble I ended up facing. It all started pretty innocently. Just two coworkers who happened to spend some time together over the Christmas break. We worked at the same school, taught in neighboring departments, and honestly we hadn't been close before that. But being away from the usual chaos for a little while, things felt different. There wasn't the same pressure or the constant juggling of lesson plans and parent emails. It felt easy to just be ourselves, no masks, no facades. We met up for drinks a couple of times, just casually, nothing official. It wasn't like we sat down and said, "Hey, let's date." No, it was more spontaneous, a few exchanged glances here, some lingering touches there. By the time I flew back home, it was clear we'd shared something that felt a lot more personal than a simple holiday hookup. But we both agreed to keep it quiet. The teacher's lounge, after all, thrives on gossip and assumptions faster than you can blink. For a while it was easy. We played it cool at work, acting like nothing had happened, and honestly I was relieved. Our fling was over before it even got complicated. We didn't have a conversation about us after the holidays, and I thought that was fine. No pressure, no promises. Just a memory to tuck away. But that's when the cracks started showing. Slowly, I noticed a change in her. At first, it was tiny things. A glance that lingered too long. A comment dropped with an edge I hadn't noticed before. Then came the whispers. Little remarks in meetings, subtle digs about professionalism and discretion, always wrapped up in a half-smile that felt like a warning. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, I felt the atmosphere shift around us, like a storm gathering on the horizon. What unsettled me the most was her growing suspicion. She started acting like I'd spilled something I shouldn't have. She hinted at conversations where our private moments were supposedly being dissected by other teachers. It was never direct, but the message was clear. She thought I had talked about her, that I'd broken the unofficial code we'd silently agreed on. And honestly, I hadn't said a word. I'd been careful to keep our story just between us. Despite her paranoia, I wanted to believe we could handle it. Maybe it was embarrassment. Maybe it was just the embarrassment staging a slow takeover of the friendship we once had. But every attempt I made to ease the tension was met with a wall, cold silence, avoidance, or sometimes these sharp, accusatory looks that left my stomach knotting. The person I'd shared those quiet holiday nights with seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize. What made it worse was how this tension bled into my work life. Teaching is already stressful, no doubt, but now every interaction with her was a minefield. I dreaded group meetings where I'd catch her staring, as if waiting for me to slip up. Our previously easy camaraderie turned into awkward silences that echoed louder than any argument. And I was stuck wondering what went wrong. What had caused this sudden shift from mutual respect to mistrust? I think that's when I started feeling it. The weight of it all pressing down on me, heavier than any stack of lesson plans or grading. It wasn't just about the fling anymore. It was about navigating the fallout from something that started as a simple, secret moment, but was now morphing into something much darker. For the first time, I questioned how much of this I could handle without it fracturing everything I'd built. My reputation, my career, my sense of self. I remember one afternoon clearly when I was sitting in the faculty lounge, trying to pretend I wasn't paying attention. But her words cut right through me. She muttered something about trust and loyalty, but it wasn't the usual conversation. Felt like a threat, wrapped in disappointment. At that moment, it hit me that this wasn't going to be easy to brush off. The paranoia was taking over, and it was only going to get worse. Looking back now, I realized that's when the real trouble began. The friendly colleague I once knew became someone I no longer trusted. A shadow lurking in the background, ready to make my life difficult in ways I hadn't even imagined yet. And honestly, I didn't know what to do next. Her paranoia didn't just stop at suspicious looks or cutting remarks. It escalated. The intimidation, the manipulative behavior, those were the next chapters in a story I never wanted to be a part of. But that's exactly where things didn't go south overnight. It was this creeping, heavy feeling that started small, and then snowballed into something I couldn't shake. At first, the threats were these offhand comments, little digs that I could brush off or laugh nervously about. But that was just the beginning. The colleague, I'll call her Lisa, started showing up more often where I was, like outside the staff lounge or near my classroom. She'd make these vague remarks that felt like warnings, even though she was always smiling almost sweetly. I remember one morning in particular. Right before class, Lisa cornered me by the lockers. She said, "You know, not everyone is as forgiving as I am. Some people know how to make things difficult." At the time I wasn't quite sure what she meant, so I just nodded, trying to stay calm. But inside there was this tight knot growing in my stomach. It was like she was holding a loaded gun under the table, and just waving it around to remind me that she could fire at any moment. What made it worse was that Lisa was also an expert at gaslighting. If I ever confronted her or tried to set boundaries, she'd turn it around on me, making me question if I was overreacting or imagining things. "You're so sensitive," she'd say. "Maybe you're just stressed because of work." She twisted the truth so much that I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down I knew something was terribly wrong. The stress piled up day after day, like carrying bricks in my backpack that just kept getting heavier. I would wake up feeling completely drained, and by the time I got to school, I was already fighting this undercurrent of dread. My usual enthusiasm for teaching disappeared. Instead of planning lessons with energy, I found myself distracted, anxious, constantly scanning the hallways for Lisa's shadow. One particularly bad day, the anxiety got the best of me. It was during my third period class, one of those moments when everything happens all at once. My heart started racing uncontrollably, my vision blurred, and it felt like I couldn't breathe no matter how hard I tried. I remember gripping the edge of my desk so tightly my knuckles turned white, but the panic just wouldn't subside. The students started noticing. Some whispered, others just stared, clearly confused. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. A colleague who was nearby noticed and immediately called for help. I was rushed to the hospital, and for the first time it all hit me, the full weight of what I'd been enduring. Sitting there in that sterile room watching the machines beep steadily, I realized how far things had spiraled. This wasn't just about a complicated fling or awkward workplace drama anymore. It was about my health, my safety, and my sanity. While visiting hours were strict, the nurses and doctors kept asking what had brought me in. Some part of me wanted to protect Lisa, to keep this secret buried. But the truth was that I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I was physically, emotionally spent, and the breakdown made it impossible to hide what was really going on. It wasn't the plan to let everything come crashing down like that, but at that moment I understood I had no choice. The situation had forced a crack wide open, and now everyone would see what was beneath the surface. After witnessing the crisis, my supervisor started asking questions I used to dodge or answer vaguely. But now I knew I had to tell them the truth. I remember sitting at my desk one morning, heart pounding, staring at the screen full of those messages again. Each new text from her wasn't just unsettling, it was downright threatening. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe it was just stress talking, a moment of weakness in the heat of the moment. But it didn't stop. The paranoia, the accusations, the veiled warnings that I couldn't just walk away from this, they kept coming, and honestly I was terrified. For a while I kept all of this to myself. I thought maybe I could handle it, maybe I could smooth things over without anyone else getting involved. But then I realized something important. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was affecting my ability to show up at work, to be present for my students, to teach effectively. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach would knot up. I was second-guessing everything, wondering if I'd hear from her again, wondering if she was standing somewhere outside the school, waiting. I reached a breaking point one afternoon when I got a message that crossed a line. It was a direct threat about my safety. That was it. I couldn't keep pretending this was something I could manage alone. I decided I had to speak up, even if it meant pushing into uncomfortable territory. So I went to my department head and shared everything, the texts, the calls, the escalating fear I was feeling. I showed her each message, watching her face change from concern to determination. We went to the principal next, and then to the school's HR department. It was heavy laying it all out there, the personal details, the complicated history, the genuine worry. But the staff took it seriously. More seriously than I expected, actually. Within days, my colleague was removed from the public school system. It was swift and in some ways brutal. I heard whispers about warnings being sent out to other schools where she might try to apply. It was clear that the priority was making sure she wouldn't have the same access or opportunity to create fear or disrupt anyone else's workplace. I didn't envy the administrators involved. They had to act fast, balancing everyone's safety with due process. But I couldn't help feeling a little responsible for how quickly and severely things were moving. At first, I thought I'd feel relief, like a weight lifted off my shoulders. And I did for a moment. But then, a tangle of guilt started sinking in. This was a person I had known, maybe even cared about at some point. How had it come to this? And was this the right way to handle it? I kept wondering if there could have been another way, a middle ground where no one got hurt so badly. Still, I reminded myself why I had done it. This wasn't just about protecting me. It was about keeping my workplace safe, about setting boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. I had to put my well-being first, even if it meant watching someone else pay the price. With my colleague removed from our school system, and warnings out to other districts, the immediate danger was over. But as I sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of an empty classroom, I realized something else was waiting for me. A lot of fallout, both external and internal. The next steps wouldn't be easy, and the emotional aftermath was just beginning. That's when I started really reflecting on everything, the consequences, the damage, and the unclear future. I thought that once I spoke up and things finally got put in motion, that would be the end of it. Like I could just move on with my life, breathe easier, and not have to constantly look over my shoulder. But that's not how it went. Not even close. After everything settled, I started hearing bits and pieces about what happened to Mike, my colleague from the school. He'd lost his job, obviously, which I knew was going to be rough, but I didn't really think about what that meant beyond just him being off the staff. Then I heard he was struggling with some serious financial problems. Credit card bills piling up, rent overdue. And on top of that, his family life wasn't exactly a sanctuary. People close to him said things were tense, maybe even falling apart. I was so wrapped up in protecting myself, I hadn't really stopped to think about how badly this was hitting him in every other aspect of his life. And honestly, it shook me. A lot. Part of me wanted to say, well, he brought all this on himself. Because let's be real, his behavior was threatening and crossed all kinds of boundaries. I had every right to protect myself. But there was this knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away, this guilt that whispered, was it all too much? Sometimes I'd catch myself replaying moments, wondering if I could have handled things differently or if there was anything I missed that might have stopped things from escalating. I kept asking myself what justice really meant here. Because legally and morally I was justified. I did what anyone should do when feeling unsafe. I set limits and stood my ground. But in the quiet moments, away from the chaos and the fear, it felt less clear-cut. I saw that Mike, beyond all his paranoia and threats, was also a human being facing his own demons. Did that make what I did wrong? No. But it made me realize it's rarely black and white. Sometimes standing up for yourself inevitably causes pain to someone else, no matter how necessary it is. I've spent so many nights grappling with this strange mix of relief and remorse. Relief that I'm safe. Remorse for the fallout that has affected someone I once cared about, someone I used to share jokes and late-night grading sessions with. That tension has taught me something important. That right and wrong aren't always opposites but often exist side by side, messy and complicated. So now, moving forward, I'm holding on to that lesson. Boundaries, clear, firm, but also communicated with as much honesty and empathy as possible, have to be the foundation. Because you can't just protect yourself in a vacuum. You have to try to understand, even when it's hard, and accept that some consequences are unavoidable but not without reason or reflection. As painful as it's been, I'm realizing this isn't just my story. It's a reminder of why we have to keep conversations open and honest, and why we can't let fear or silence dictate our actions. Because in the end, justice and empathy aren't enemies. They have to coexist. And that's the only way forward.